Good morning. Welcome to the December 18th Transportation Infrastructure and Planning Subcommittee. I'm calling the meeting to order. And will the city attorney please explain public comment?
Thank you. Good morning. Members of the public may speak for up to 2 minutes to comment on agenda items to be discussed. Comments must be related to the agenda item and the action being considered by the subcommittee. General comments that go beyond the scope of the agenda item must be made in the call to the public session at the end of the agenda. The City Council and staff cannot discuss or comment on matters related to pending investigations, claims, or litigation. Additionally, any member of the public who appears before the subcommittee in their capacity as a lobbyist must be required by the Phoenix City Code disclose this fact before addressing the subcommittee. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have an interpreter. Sorry, I can't talk today. I'm having a day. Oscar Monroe. He's downstairs. Could you please introduce yourself?
Good morning. My name is Oscar Monroy. I will be serving as your Spanish interpreter for today's City of Phoenix Subcommittee meeting. I will now take a moment to introduce myself to our Spanish-speaking audience and review some guidelines. Buenos días, mi nombre es Oscar Monroy. Estaré sirviendo hoy como su intérprete para la reunión del Subcomité de la Ciudad de Phoenix. Deseo pedirles de antemano si va a dar un comentario público, por favor hable despacio, con claridad y evite tener distracciones de fondo. Finalmente, pause después de cada una o dos oraciones para poder interpretar lo que esté diciendo de la manera más completa posible. Thank you.
Thank you. The first order of business is approval of minutes. Do I have a motion?
I so move.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
It carries unanimously. Next, we have items 2 through 5, which are consent agenda. Are there any questions on the consent? If not, can I get a motion?
So move.
I'll second the motion.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Can I make just one comment on one of the items?
Absolutely.
Item number 4 is approval of the Phil Gordon Threatened Building Grant. And so I think that's very important for the historic district, and I'm so happy to see it moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. It carries unanimously. And now we go into our discussion items, and the first is Water Services Department Asset Management Program update.
Yes, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, I'll introduce Troy Hayes, Water Services Director, who's here to speak on this item, and he'll introduce his team presenting.
I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm just so sorry.
Vice Mayor and members of the subcommittee, we are back here today to have a little discussion about asset management. As you recall, as we were here back in October talking about asset management as related to pipes, today we want to talk about that asset management principles as it relates to water and wastewater treatment facilities and remote facilities. As you guys are well aware, remote facilities are pump stations, pressure reducing stations, and tanks and other things that we have out in our system that help us move water around and make sure that we are able to have reliable services. The asset management principles that we have are based on extending the useful life of our assets and making sure that we're getting the most out of them, making sure that our condition assessments and our maintenance programs are correlated so that we get the longest lasting life out of our assets and that we're not having to go back in and replace them. But then on the other side of having those planned out and the replacements done so that we're not running to failure and having situations out in our system. I have with me again here today our Assistant Director, Nazario Prieto, as well as our two fabulous Deputy Directors of Engineering, Darlene Helm and Patty Kennedy. And with that, I'll turn it over to Nazario.
Sure. Thank you, Troy. Good morning. Good morning, Vice Mayor, members of the subcommittee. Thank you for allowing us again to share an update on our Water Services Department's asset management program. Building on what we discussed last month, I'd like to emphasize how this program ensures the sustainability and reliability of our utility assets through a strategic, life cycle-based approach. So the key elements include inventory and planning, design and construction, operation and maintenance, retirement, and renewal. These are the 4 pillars that guide our decisions, allowing us to balance operational performance, financial stewardship, long-term sustainability. Our collaborative approach, which includes leveraging internal expertise and external consultants, ensures that we deliver best-in-class results. With that overview, I'll now hand it over to Darlene and Patty, who will dive deeper into the application of these principles at our water and wastewater treatment facilities.
All right, thank you, Nazario. Today I'm going to give a high-level overview of our water treatment plants and our water remote facilities asset management programs. As a reminder, the City of Phoenix owns 5 water treatment plants, which are used to supply high-quality water to our customers in the city's water service area. This figure is a representation of the 2 major water sources and the water treatment plants spread throughout the city. We have 3 plants that receive salt and Verde River delivered through the Salt River Project canal system. Our 24th Street water treatment plant is located near 24th Street and Lincoln Drive. Our Deer Valley water treatment plant is located near 31st Avenue and Dunlap. And our Val Vista water treatment plant, a jointly owned facility with the City of Mesa, is located along McDowell Road between Lindsay and Val Vista Roads. We also have 2 plants that receive Colorado River water delivered through the Central Arizona Project canal system. We have our Union Hills water treatment plant, which is located at the intersection of Deer Valley and Cave Creek Road. And we have our Lake Pleasant water treatment plant, which is located along New River Road, north of Carefree Highway. The water treatment plant rehab program was established to extend existing structures and equipment life at our 5 water treatment plants. This program is planned and funded to complete a major rehab project for each treatment plant on a 4 to 5 year rotating schedule. The main components of rehabilitation have been identified through asset condition assessments, using a combination of risk analysis and remaining useful life calculations. The assets are given a score of 1 to 5, with 1 being a like new asset and 5 being a failed asset. Rehabilitation projects are prioritized based on risk and budget constraints. Because of the proactive asset management program at the water treatment plants, very few assets are failed or at imminent failure when condition assessments are completed, and these are addressed by operations staff or in the next rehab project. The largest category of water remote facilities are booster pump stations, and there are 109 pumping stations throughout the water system. These facilities help to maintain adequate water pressure, move water from lower elevations to higher elevations, and move water during peak demand events such as fire events. The goal of the booster pump station rehabilitation program is to determine and monitor the condition of the assets at the 109 pumping stations. As part of this program, we typically assess the booster pump stations approximately every 10 years. When the assessments have determined that the equipment is at the end of its useful life, we design and construct a complete replacement of all the pumping station components. Rehabilitation projects are based on criticality and risk of not having booster pump station in service. Water remote facilities also include 57 water storage tanks, which maintain adequate water pressure and provide water for peak customer demand periods throughout the day. They also provide redundancy within the system in times of localized water system outages, such as water main breaks. The goal of the storage reservoir and tank program is to determine and monitor the condition of the asset to extend the asset life and reduce the possibility of failure. A partial assessment of each reservoir is conducted every 5 years. A full assessment is conducted every 10 years and includes performing a leak test, draining and cleaning the reservoir, and then thoroughly inspected all of the structural elements of the reservoir. Major rehab projects incorporate the recommendations from these assessments. As presented, we have ongoing programs to rehabilitate and replace aging assets at the treatment plants and remote facilities, and the budget you see is based on these programs. Over the next 6 years, we have budgeted $227 million for water storage reservoirs, $212 million for booster pump stations, and $756 million for water treatment plants in the Water Capital Program. On this chart, there's a large increase in the water treatment plant budget, that's the blue bar, starting in fiscal year 27-28. There are several reasons for this increase. In fiscal year 27-28, there are 2 large construction projects. One includes replacing the electrical substation at the Deer Valley Water Treatment Plant, and the other is adding backup power at the 24th Street Water Treatment Plant. You can also see that the budget stays at this higher amount due to a couple of reasons. One is due to just increased costs of the work. When costs initially started increasing the last couple of years, we had to delay rehab work until we could adjust the capital budget, as we are showing starting in fiscal year 27-28. Additionally, the capital budget now includes rehab work at the Lake Pleasant Water Treatment Plant in fiscal year 28-29 and 29-30. The increase in fiscal year 26-27 in the storage budget, which is the purple bar, is due to 2 new reservoirs being constructed in the northern portion of the water system. Now I'll turn over to Patty Kennedy to present on the wastewater treatment plants and remote facilities.
Thank you, Darlene. I am Patty Kennedy, Deputy Director over Wastewater Engineering. The wastewater pipes and infrastructure we talked about at our last presentation all terminate at one of 3 wastewater treatment plants, 91st Avenue, 23rd Avenue, or Cave Creek Water Rec Plant. 91st Avenue, located at 91st Avenue and Southern in the southwest part of the Phoenix, is the largest of our 3 plants. This facility is unique in that it is jointly owned with 4 partner cities, Glendale, Mesa, Scottsdale, and Tempe. Phoenix operates this facility on behalf of the partners. The 23rd Avenue wastewater treatment plant is located at 23rd Avenue and Lower Buckeye. 23rd Avenue wastewater treatment plant treats flows from the central Phoenix area. Our 3rd facility is the Cave Creek Water Rec Plant. It is located at Deer Valley and Cave Creek Roads and is the smallest of our facilities. Due to the downturn in growth, this facility was taken out of service in 2009. We are now in the process of bringing this facility back online and will be operational in 2026. Every year, we review and update the assets at our treatment plants. The asset list is reviewed with operations and management. For aging assets, we have 3 options: rehabilitate, replace, or modify. This is an example of a rehab project at the 23rd Avenue wastewater treatment plant. The secondary sedimentation basins were taken out of service, and the rake arms and center influent feed well were recoated. While the basins were out of service and drained, we also inspected them and repaired any concrete damage. The next picture here is an example of a replacement project at 91st Avenue. This picture shows new replacement rake arms being delivered and attached. And the last photo is a modification and new install. A new substation was installed at the 23rd Avenue wastewater treatment plant to replace an aging one. This photo shows all the new electrical conduits that were installed. Wastewater flows by gravity until either pipes get too deep or the terrain is not conducive for gravity, such as the need to pump over a hill or around a mountain. In those cases, a lift station is needed. We have 29 lift stations in our system. The lift station pumps wastewater through a pressurized pipe, also known as a force main. The force main discharges into a manhole structure that connects to the gravity system, which ends at one of our wastewater treatment plants. Our system also includes odor control stations. There are 2 major options to treat odors in the collection system. We can either treat the vapor phase or air by processing the foul air through a filter, or we can treat the liquid phase by using chemicals. Phoenix utilizes both options and both require a facility. Similar to plants, lift stations, force mains, and odor control stations are assessed regularly. Lift station assessments involve evaluating each of the assets and scoring them. Force main assessments utilize special tools to assess the condition of the force main. There are different tools that can be used to gather data, such as the wall thickness and areas of concern in our force mains. This photo shows one of the pipe assessment technologies that Water Services has used to gain system information. This slide highlights one of our odor control projects. The top picture was the site before rehab. The bottom picture is the same site, similar view after rehab. This location is a great example of a project where Water Services worked with the Office of Arts and Culture when we were rehabbing the station. The artists and key stakeholders were brought in during the design phase to assist with creating a more aesthetically pleasing wall and shade structure. Water Service Department has an ongoing program to rehabilitate and replace aging assets at wastewater treatment plants, lift stations, and odor control facilities. Over the next 6 years, we have budgeted in the capital wastewater program $1,248 million for wastewater treatment plants, $135 million for remote facilities, including force mains, and $13 million for odor control facilities. You will note that the 24-25 wastewater treatment plant value is large compared to future years. This is due to the Cave Creek Water Reclamation Plant rehab, which is currently under construction. And now I'd like to open it up to any questions.
Thank you. Looking towards the future, what do you think will happen with Cave Creek? Will it help some of the growth in the north, or will we be looking at another facility?
Yeah, so Vice Mayor, there's a planning area up there in which we envision two facilities, two wastewater treatment facilities, with the Cave Creek side treating the northeast side of that area, and then a North Gateway facility up towards the Public Works Transfer Station. The Water Services Department has envisioned a new wastewater treatment facility there since the 1990s, in which we purchased the property and are waiting for the flows and all of the other demands up there to start going. And so we are recently seeing that. We're seeing a lot of development activity around the TSMC area. And so potentially in the future here, the North Gateway facility would have to start design and construction.
And with the growth in Peoria, have you had any discussions with the city of Peoria? Because as we move north with our semiconductor and some of the development around it, I think we're also seeing that occur in the city of Peoria.
Yeah, so Vice Mayor and members of the committee, yeah, so one of the discussions that we've been having is the growth up in that northwest area. Nazari and I have recently reached out to the city of Peoria. We sit with them every once in a while. We've had discussions with them about the Lake Pleasant water treatment plant and potentially them talking to us about the capacity of that. I think we have a meeting scheduled with their director at the first of the year to go and talk about the growth in our northwest area, which would be their northeast part of Peoria. So maybe some synergies associated with facilities and other things like that that we could potentially do with them.
Thank you. It certainly is very expensive to manage all this, and I appreciate that you have this management program to make sure we stay on point. Are there any other questions or comments?
I just have a comment, Vice Mayor. Thank you so much, team, for putting this very comprehensive report together. I always appreciate our subcommittee meetings because it's new learning. As one of the newest council members and not so new right now, there's a great deal to still learn. And the work that our staff does is just incredible. I always say we may be the 5th largest city in the United States, but we have first-rate staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments?
I have a comment.
Go.
Thank you,
Yes.
Vice Mayor. And I appreciate the presentation and how and the life cycle and things that are how they're done. However, we're currently maintaining the water treatment plants that we have and the wastewater treatment plants we have. My understanding is that we will probably need future plants or areas, as we talked about the Cave Creek. How, I guess where I'm going is, how will that be funded? Because I know there's multiple ways of these plants being funded. And so I want to get to the root of what we need to get to the root of in our future.
Yeah, so I can touch on it briefly, but I think the presentation after us is specifically
Okay.
to address that issue. But specifically for the water and wastewater utilities, it's kind of a 3 or 4 pronged approach that it can have. Most of the rehabilitation and the capital programs that we have are paid through our rates, with our customers paying what they have in the month. Everything that we've presented here today with the costs are included in the financial plan in which we presented earlier in the year to the subcommittee. But we're also out pursuing federal grants as well. There's a couple of federal grants associated with water and wastewater, more specifically recently about the challenges that we have on the Colorado River system and in trying to bring additional supplies and other things like that in. But we also then partner with the development community for them to pay their portion of what we need to expand our system to be able to support the development that they have. And it's trying to balance all of those funding sources to come up with a solution for the issues that we have of trying to either put new infrastructure in or rehabilitate the infrastructure that we do have.
Okay, because my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's really now building up the north. And maintaining what we have, but really where the growth is up north. And in doing that, there are multiple ways that we do the funding, as stated, developer, landowner, Phoenix taxes and rates, and then other sources of federal government. And so I think that's important for constituents to understand and know how we do our due diligence in being able to pull all the different resources that we can in order to make things happen in this city and to move water, because I'm in Central City, so I know Central City really well, but I also know they have to move water from Central City up. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because when I had to vote on an increase, a water increase, and even a wastewater increase, it was for infrastructure and maintenance of infrastructure, but also of being able to build new infrastructure. So where the growth is. And so I just want to put it on record so people understand some of the dialogue that we're having right now, and understand where the future dialogue is going. And we're demonstrating what we're doing with our dollars that we have in order to make things happen. So I want to appreciate it. I appreciate and thank you for that.
Thank you. Any other comments? Well, I think the next presentation will really highlight how we do build infrastructure, and especially in new growth areas. So why don't we go to item 7, infrastructure funding and financing update.
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, here to kick off this item is Deputy City Manager Alan Stevenson, and Alan will introduce the rest of the team of presenters.
Thank you, Mario. Madam Vice Chair, members of the subcommittee, good morning. Today I have with me Adam Miller, who's a Deputy Director within the Planning and Development Department and over our Infrastructure Funding Group in Planning and Development Department, and Dr. Max Wilson, who's a Deputy Director in the Water Services Department. This item goes back to provide an overview of how the city funds infrastructure and finances infrastructure as it relates to growth and development. It starts out with a bigger picture, and then we will focus in on particular water department and water and wastewater facilities and how those are funded as by way of an example. It is something that the TIP subcommittee did ask for this presentation earlier this spring. And before we turn over to the team, I want to provide a little bit of background. And going back to the late 1990s, there was a state change called the Growing Smarter Act, and that legislation required cities to look at the cost of development as part of their general plans, to add language to general plans that talked about how to fund growth and development from an infrastructure standpoint, but also make sure that it is something that is balancing the needs of new development, but not overburdening the existing residents and ratepayers, and making sure that there's a balance in trying to fulfill what we need to do there in providing that infrastructure, but at the same time making sure that new development is being charged amount through impact fees and other means to help pay for itself over time. And so this item will discuss those other options and impact fees as well in there. And then there is a couple of recommendations here at the end. And so one of the critical discussions that we want to focus in on is how do we continue the high quality of growth opportunities that enhance the city's ability to attract our economic development opportunities, increase the housing that we all need, while not negatively impacting those future residents and ratepayers, but attracting what we want in the city so we continue to grow in a quality manner that we like to see, pursuant to the direction of the mayor and council. And so the mayor and council have been leaders in this area. The city has been the fastest growing large city in U.S. Census data over the last 10 plus years. So that data is just from 2010 to 2020, because that's when the census does their information. But since that time, we've had things like TSMC and a lot of other things. So we are still continuing to grow at an incredibly fast rate. And the mayor and council have been the strong leaders in this area with responsible long-range planning, trying to mitigate things that are potential negative impacts of growth and development, but at the same time, recognizing that we need to have those opportunities for economic development, jobs, housing, all the things that we want to see happen, but then tying that in with prudent fiscal management of the city to ensure that we're balancing existing resident needs and future resident needs along with development needs to foster growth there. And so because of this unprecedented development opportunities, it really has created some significant infrastructure investment needs that the city is contemplating. And part of what you saw in your last presentation was some of that development things as it relates to the water department and where their CIP budget goes and how they target some of their improvements. And so real quick before we jump forward here, the map you see here shows the city's annexation over decades here. And so you can see starting off with the light grays, greens, and purples. In the middle is the original town site and growing out over the decades to the current 520 square miles. And within that area, that large size obviously comes with it a responsibility to maintain a lot of existing infrastructure. And that is increasingly where the city's CIP budget goes to pay for existing, whether it's water, sewer, streets, all of those things to maintain them. That costs, a lot to, when you have such a large city, this size, to maintain all of those things. So highlighting a couple of the successes that you see, the growth and development and our corridors that are happening are throughout the city where we need infrastructure investments. And so this just highlights all the way up north along the Loop 303 and along the 101 and the northeast part of the city. The peachish color is the light rail line and what's happening in those areas as well. Then in District 5, you have the stuff along the Loop 101 corridor between I-10 and the city of Glendale. And then the Loop 202 and what's happening there now with the opening of that freeway. And then the Rio Reimagined is the green area in the middle is there as well. And now to highlight a couple of things here. So obviously there's TSMC and the Halo Vista project. And TSMC is going up faster than any project that I can remember, certainly in my 20 years here at the city, and probably any time in Phoenix. I grew up here and watched a lot of growth and development happen. I can't think of any other complex that has gone up as quickly as that has. And, they are spurring a lot of extra development that's coming around there, like the Halo Vista project that the mayor and council have heard about as well. Over in Northeast Phoenix, we have the Discovery Triangle, ASU, Mayo campus that is developing over there and moving forward quickly as well. Jumping down to kind of the south area here, you have a lot of new development happening within the light rail corridor and everything that's going in that particular area for the city. You have the Rio Reimagined project that is going forward to connect our existing Tres Rios wetlands area with the habitat restoration project for Rio Salado that has already taken place, and with that is spurring economic development around the banks surrounding it, from new Commerce Park projects to other exciting economic development opportunities that are going in along the Rio. Over along the 202 corridor, here's an example of retail that the community's long wanted to take place down in Baseline and the 202 that's now opened with the freeway. Some of our other highlights on infrastructure challenges, wastewater collection is one, obviously, that we talked a little bit about. Water system reliability is really investments in the city's water infrastructure to ensure a reliable water source for the future. So that is our strategy with advanced water purification and what the city is trying to do to start making those incremental investments to ensure that we continue to grow in a sustainable manner, that existing residents and future residents have water supply that meets all of our needs. Roads and bridges are another area, depending on where in the city you are at, that we have some significant needs for. And so that's where we have some big infrastructure costs in some of those areas. Public safety, as it relates to response times, are another issue that we've been working with police and fire on to ensure that we have those in areas that allow them to respond quickly in their response time targets as the city continues to grow in these different areas. And then finally, drainage infrastructure is a significant area in the parts of the southwest growth area for the city, because that area has been farmland for a number of years, and so we're having to go back in and put in drainage infrastructure in those areas to retain water and convey it, because the natural river water course is no longer there because of the farming like it is up north. So that's an example of how those different infrastructure challenges are things that the city has to work to address from a big picture standpoint to try and then help facilitate the investment that comes with development and projects that come in terms of the ways that we can require them to build and do some of the infrastructure. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Adam, and then we'll be happy to answer some questions at the very end.
Thank you, Alan. Good morning, Vice Mayor, members of the subcommittee. I'm going to talk about how those facilities that Alan just identified actually get built, how they actually get put into service. And then Max is going to take over for a few minutes and talk about a specific situation with water treatment and wastewater treatment, to use that both as an example of our funding challenges, but also as a unique funding challenge that the city faces going forward. Providing public infrastructure for growth is a shared responsibility between private development and the city. As Alan mentioned, the city's general plan that is required under the Arizona's Growing Smarter Act includes an infrastructure funding element that is guided by the principle that new development should not negatively affect existing communities and that growth should pay for growth. At the same time, U.S. courts have established limits on what cities can require of new development through clarifying interpretations of the takings clause. In general, private development is responsible for the basic infrastructure needs required by code. These facilities are typically necessary for public health, sanitation, and transportation, and must be completed prior to occupying new homes or businesses. The city is responsible for planning for growth, including identifying capital facility needs and administering developer contributions, both physical improvements that are required at the time of development, as well as financial contributions that are required of new developers. Financial contributions from new development, as well as funding from local taxes and rates, may be allocated for facilities that serve new development through the city's annual budget process. The city primarily provides elective improvements that are not required prior to occupying homes and businesses, but are critical to maintaining the high quality of service and quality of life that our residents have come to expect. Facilities commonly provided by the city include parks, libraries, and public safety improvements. In addition to private development contributions and city taxes and rates, the city has and will continue to aggressively pursue outside resources to support beneficial growth and offset the cost to extend services for new development. These include federal grants, congressional earmarks, and regional funds for infrastructure such as Prop 479 funding for transportation. So when we think about how new infrastructure is provided, there are really just the three buckets to draw from. I mentioned private development is typically responsible for the basic sanitation and transportation infrastructure. I think it goes without saying that that includes all the improvements within the development boundaries, such as the local streets, water distribution, and sewer collection facilities. But that may also include off-site improvements necessary to extend the city's existing infrastructure networks, including the remote facilities that you just heard Darlene and Patty describing from the Water Services team. These developer contributions are required by code to comply with the city's engineering design standards. New development may also have exactions or zoning stipulations required as a condition of development approval that are necessary to address negative impacts on existing public facilities. For example, new development may be asked to add travel lanes or intersection improvements to nearby roads, or they may be required to enlarge water or sewer lines to ensure sufficient capacity is available to serve the development without negatively impacting the surrounding community. In addition to physical off-site improvements, new development may be required to make financial contributions through the assessment of impact fees or other fees charged in lieu of required constructing physical improvements. Development fees are enabled under state statutes, which specify the types of public facilities that are eligible for funding with development fees. The city currently collects impact fees for public safety facilities, parks, libraries, flood control improvements, roads and bridges, wastewater collection and treatment facilities, water distribution, water treatment, and water supplies. The city is in the process of reviewing the development impact fees, and council is slated to consider updating the principal planning documents for the impact fee program at its formal meeting this afternoon. Community facility districts are another opportunity for private development to finance their infrastructure requirements. Developers can apply to have a community facilities district set up by the city. These are special taxing districts used to finance public infrastructure, where the residents within the district would be assessed fees or property tax to recoup the cost of bond, to repay the debts on bonds sold by the district. Community facility districts are time-intensive to start up. The city takes on the administrative responsibility of those districts, and they aren't typically used for significant infrastructure improvements such as the water and wastewater treatment facilities that Max will be discussing momentarily. Before the city programs new capital facilities, operating costs for new facilities must be identified through rate setting or the annual budget review for non-enterprise departments. The city has been expanding at a rapid pace since around the 1950s. And for that reason, the water, sewer, and roads that were put in place at that time are now due to be replaced. And so, as Alan mentioned previously, the vast majority of capital operating budget through the CIP program is really being prioritized toward our replacement of old, aging infrastructure, particularly in the central city. The city also collects funds that are restricted for a specific use. That includes the impact fees that I discussed earlier, as well as special excise taxes, such as the Parks Preserve initiative funding that goes toward preserve acquisition, as well as flatland park development and operations of parks. Revenue bonds are one of the tools that the city has to be able to help finance large public facilities. Revenue bonds are backed typically by our water rate and sewer ratepayers, and they allow for the city to secure the funding to get large facilities constructed and then recoup that cost and pay back that debt over an extended period of time. Revenue bonds are generally scheduled for 25 and up to 40-year payback periods. And then finally, as I mentioned before, the city is going after grants and other contributions from partner agencies. We will continue to do that. I do want to highlight as an example of partner contributions, the partnership that the city has with the Flood Control District of Maricopa County and the matching arrangements that we have used now for decades to construct large regional flood control projects, both in Southwest Phoenix and the current project in Northeast Phoenix to contain the Rawhide Wash floodplain. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Max, and then we'll be happy to take questions.
Could I just make a comment when you were talking about the central city and aging infrastructure? It's not just that, it's because of the increased density. We're actually having to look at new infrastructure like fire stations and police substations, correct?
Yes, absolutely. And Vice Mayor and members of the council, you will recall that that was an emphasis with the GeoBond program that was recently passed. Thanks for bringing that up, Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Adam and Alan. Vice Mayor, members of the subcommittee, I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about some of the unique challenges that are facing us on the water and wastewater treatment side. My name is Max Wilson. I am the Deputy Water Services Director with oversight of the Water Planning Division, which includes our water resources, water conservation, development planning, and infrastructure records teams. The fundamental challenge that the city faces citywide right now is in limitations to water and wastewater treatment. In the central city portion of the city that you heard Patty and Darlene talking about earlier at 91st Avenue Wastewater Treatment Plant, we are currently in a condition where solids capacity, existing capacity to deal with the solids that are in wastewater, has been reached, and therefore that plant, in order for continued development and redevelopment in the central part of the city, to Vice Mayor Stark's comment a moment ago, that plant will need to be expanded to deal with those challenges. Yes, ma'am?
Vice Mayor, I have a question. Are you saying the wastewater plant on 91st Avenue services Central City?
Vice Mayor, members of the subcommittee, it serves the entire city,
Okay.
but it does drain the central city as well.
Okay, but it serves the entire city.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
then I'm gonna get some clarity. What do you consider Central City? And I was like, wait a minute, we define Central City very different.
Fair question, Councilman Pastor. Vice Mayor, members of the subcommittee, since I brought that term up, I'll go ahead and respond to the question. And I think the councilwoman's correct that we may have different ideas of it. As the administrator of the Development Impact Fee Program, I generally view our new development areas where the existing development impact fees are collected to be the new development part of the city, and the remainder to be Central City. In reference to the replacement of water and sewer lines specifically, I had in mind generally areas of the city that were developed in the 1950s, if that helps clarify.
Yes, because if we go by villages, and if you ask your historic, they will tell you where Central, Midtown, Uptown, Central City is. That's why I'm asking. Because in my head, I'm like, I'm not getting a new fire station in Central City. What are you talking about? But we had our sidebar conversation, and now I understand. So thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Councilman Pastor, glad we could give some clarification on that. So in addition to these challenges at the 91st Avenue wastewater treatment plant with solids capacity, we also have an additional need for wet water treatment, primary treatment for both water and wastewater in the northern portion of the city. Particularly in those new growth areas that Adam was mentioning. The challenges with expanding plants in this way is that the costs associated with doing these types of plant expansions are typically very, very large. And in addition to these very large costs in the hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars, we have a challenge in that the plant serves many, many developments, not one specific development. And as such, it is difficult for us to be able to, in most cases, be able to directly ascribe the need for a plant to any one specific entity and then to stipulate them to deconstruct that facility. As such, the way the department has done this historically has been through the process of revenue bonds and impact fees that have helped repay some of those revenue bonds. However, an important component of revenue bonds, and something that I think we want to say very clearly today, is that in order for a revenue bond to be issued, we must have a secure source of financing to pay back that debt service, which is usually reflected in a rate change, a rate increase. Additionally, federal monies have been available in the past to construct some of these facilities. We are hoping that those federal monies will continue to be available in the future. However, many of the grants that we're looking at today are specifically connected to the crisis on the Colorado River, and therefore come with strings attached as far as concessions on those types of work. Speaking more specifically about how this process has worked historically, going back into the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, before the Development Impact Fee Program and before the Growing Smarter Act that Alan mentioned earlier, in general, our large treatment plants were funded by a combination of federal grant money and water and wastewater rates revenue through that revenue bond process that I was just describing. There was a transition period in the 1980s through 1990s as we began to see impact fee and impact fee related programs such as the development occupational fee begin to be implemented. However, this was also a period where we saw a declining amount of funding available through federal grants for building this type of infrastructure, and therefore it was primarily water and wastewater ratepayers who were constructing these facilities. And then finally, as we went into the 1990s, the Development Impact Fee Program reached its kind of mature state that we see it in today. And through this process, we were able to issue revenue bonds that could then be partially repaid through the collection of impact fees over time. Again, through this period, we saw federal government money available for these types of work decreasing. And as you heard from the previous presentation, we've seen operation and maintenance budgets increase rapidly through that period as we've need to maintain the pipes that were constructed in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. And with that, I'll hand it back over to Alan.
Could I ask a quick question on that? You noted that the federal money is decreasing, but we had a very significant infrastructure bill passed a few years ago. How does that play into what you're saying?
That's an excellent question. So far, the federal money that's been available to the water and wastewater utilities through the infrastructure, the Inflation Reduction Act and the bipartisan infrastructure law has been primarily related to Colorado River funding. There has not been major sources of water and wastewater infrastructure funding outside of those.
Vice Mayor, members of the subcommittee, if I could add a little bit to that also in terms of the larger grants that the city has aggressively pursued, and Mario Paniagua and Larry Smallwood from the city mayor's office have led that effort, and a lot of those grants that the city has gone forward with are focused on particular areas, low to moderate income areas. They have other requirements for them that aren't as wide open as they were in the 60s and 70s that were more about helping cities pay for things that grow. It's helping pay for things, if you get those grants, that are addressing things that were overlooked over time and trying to retrofit things for the most part. Moving on to this slide here, this is obviously an oversimplification of trying to balance how we grow and develop as a city. As we stated at the beginning, it's critical that the city make wise investments in these larger infrastructure items to ensure that we can attract quality economic development opportunities and jobs, address the housing shortage, and continue to create the city that our residents want. And at the same time, ensuring that we are balancing those funding obligations with the upfront infrastructure investments with the fact that the city then has to also operate and maintain and staff those facilities over time. And so it's really this discussion, that the mayor and council, have through various mechanisms that the city will be looking at to continue how we work on getting the city that we all want and growing forward in a quality, great manner that we've all come to see and want from the city. Based upon all of your guys' input and discussions with residents, very much that the community is focused on wanting quality jobs. They want quality, good neighborhoods where they can live and affordable housing. They don't want traffic. They, want clean air. They don't want to raise taxes. There's lots of needs that the community tells you guys on a daily basis, and it's how do you try and balance those things and make that happen, that really make the job of an elected official fun and exciting, I think, for you guys. We do have a couple of recommendations here that we're not talking about picking any, one of those types of funding mechanisms that we discussed, but there are ways for us to look at and continue to work on trying to grow in a responsible manner. And so one of those is leveraging available capacity and looking at areas where there is capacity and trying to target development within those areas. That's why it's critical to look at things like the council, had a discussion recently about data centers and, where you have capacity, where you've put in huge freeway investments and other things, and then having, a data center comes in that doesn't generate a lot of jobs, doesn't help us in trying to address some of the larger community desires. Parcel sequencing strategy is one that really could play out up north with the Arizona State Land Department because they are the much largest landowner within District 1 and District 2 in North Phoenix. And so they are required statutorily to have a 5-year disposition plan that targets how their parcels are going to be sold. And we can work with them to try and make sure that those parcels are coming out in a manner that minimizes those infrastructure costs. And then the final one would be a fiscal impact analysis. If the council wanted to pursue this item, it would be a council action and a discussion that would probably take place as part of the budget process coming up, because there is no current money to do that, but it would be looking at coming up with a scope and possibly hiring a consultant to evaluate a lot of our land use and development opportunities and what are the impacts that are created both short and long term on the city to help the council make some of these important decisions. And with that, we're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for the presentation. I also think it's important that we talk regionally. As you noted, we've got several projects that we have done with other communities, and I think we need to continue those discussions into the future. Certainly, we've done a good job with transportation at MAG, but there's probably some potential discussions on other types of infrastructure needs that I think would be valuable, and maybe Meg can bring that up and talk about it amongst all the cities. Are there any comments or any questions? Yes, Councilwoman.
Thank you so much, Vice Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. Very informative, very helpful. I just want to add a couple questions regarding some of the recommendations for next step, just to kind of flesh them out a little further. My first question goes towards a parcel sequencing strategy. You indicated that one, I would say a major player in this strategy would be the Arizona State Land Department. Do we have any insight as to where we believe they may be accommodable or welcome into this approach, or will it take some, has it been floated as an option with the State Land Department?
Vice Mayor, Councilwoman Hodge Washington, yes, we have discussed that with them over time, and they are aware of it. At times they have been open to that discussion, but other times they have some of the similar political pressures with things coming to the state and from an economic development standpoint. And so we have not been able to get them to completely to agree on adopting a sequencing strategy. But that is something that hopefully, if that's a desire of the subcommittee, that we can use that to then push that a little bit more to elevate some of that discussion at the state land department level.
Okay, thank you for the clarification on that. And then my second question goes towards your recommendation regarding leverage and available. I'm sorry, is something else you wanted to add, Adam?
I'm sorry, Councilman Hodge Washington. Adam did remind me that I might want to mention that the State Land Department, one of their constraints is that they don't get to keep any of the money that they make for the trust. It goes into the trust for education. So whatever money they get allocated from the legislature is all they have, and that typically does not allow them to have a robust budget to hire consultants to do some of the things like them develop a 5-year disposition plan and some of those things. So there is a funding challenge on the state land department side as well. That's what Adam was bringing up. Sorry about that.
No worries. We know that path a little bit more familiar than we would like to, but so I appreciate the additional information on that. My second question goes to the leverage and available capacity, and kind of my understanding of that is would be targeting more of our development within areas that have the capacity. Is there any estimate as to what that looks like? Is it still about 20% of our city? I mean, what do we think that looks like? That looks like, or we don't know.
Vice Mayor, Councilman Hodge Washington, that's a great question. I don't think we know it from a percentage standpoint, and it's something that varies depending on the user that's coming in. And so, for example, sometimes they may be, a heavier water user, in which case we would be trying to, point them into directions where we have some water capacity. Other times, they want to be inside the city more, where they want to be closer in and maybe along the light rail line. And so it's really working with our Community Economic Development Department to figure out what the actual business wants and their needs are, and trying to locate them in the city. And that's something that we do actively work with CED on a regular basis. And so we'll be continuing to do that. And then, at times there are ones where, for various reasons, the business just wants to go somewhere outside of where that is. And then that's a discussion that we end up having with you guys and then about what the cost of development is in those instances.
Okay, and we can determine how to respond to the specific development needs on the needs of that industry plus the needs of where they're actually located. So my last question goes to the fiscal impact analysis. If we were to go down that road with a consultant and actually pursue an actual plan of identification of alternative ways of doing this, what do we anticipate to be the time frame for the completion? Because I know we have stressed the capacity of our wastewater treatment facilities and other part of our infrastructure. I just want to make sure I understand what the time frame would be looking for the conclusion of analysis such as this.
Vice Mayor and Councilman Hodge Washington, I would say that staff would propose that kind of going on two fronts, and then I'll let Adam talk a little bit more about the specifics of the fiscal impact analysis timing-wise. But it would be something that we would continue on with the things we are proposing to do to address wastewater treatment, shortage, the other impacts that are happening from development while we pursue this strategy as well, because we do have vast tracts of undeveloped land that are going to continue to develop as well as redevelop. And so helping us understand that would be a parallel track, going forward. But Adam, if you could add some to kind of the specifics a little bit of how we might do the fiscal impact analysis.
Yeah, and thank you for the question, Councilmember. So for the fiscal impact analysis, I think the key thing that we're looking at is kind of both sides of the coin of new development impact on city finances. The revenue side, but also what is the cost of service. And so if we're looking at, and there's different kind of scales that we can conduct these studies. We could look at this kind of globally on a macro level and do kind of more of an academic type evaluation of what types of land uses generally provide a positive fiscal impact for the community. Alternatively, we could be looking at conducting an analysis on a specific development proposal. And if it were the latter, then the turnaround time would frankly have to be very quick. There just isn't space and time within that decision-making process to be able to slow it down for fiscal impact studies. And so if we were to move forward with fiscal impact analysis as sort of a policy in approving those developments, then we would really need to have everything teed up and ready to go as soon as those proposals kind of hit the desk.
So let's dive a little further on the analysis. Are we anticipating, I guess, help me to understand your vision here. Are we anticipating analysis that looks at a plan for, say, 10 years, next 10 years as to what is needed here, what we anticipate the growth to be in the city, where we anticipate it to go, where we anticipate the needs to be, and what we anticipate those costs to be? Are we seeing it from I guess I want to flesh it out just a little bit more for me.
Well, first, I'll just say I'm not sure that we've put that level of thought into this. We wanted to get this in front of council and kind of get an initial reaction. If this is a direction that council would like to ask staff to pursue. What I would say, however, is that what we're really contemplating is in circumstances where we're having to use city resources, whether that's revenue bonds, other taxes and rates, to help extend services to undeveloped land, we want to make sure that what develops that land is not having a negative fiscal impact on the city, right? That's just kind of the downward spiral for our overall fiscal health. And so that's the situation that we would be generally seeking to avoid.
And I understand that. And I guess my questions, maybe I'm not being as artful as I would like, but I feel like, I kind of want to know, is this something that we should be doing at this juncture before we make changes to things like our wastewater charges or impact fees? Like, are those things that we should be looking as part of the equation, is kind of where my mind is going with this. Is this kind of, should this be, instead of doing two parallel tracks, should this be step A before we make these decisions? Is kind of my question.
Mayor and Vice Mayor and Councilman Hodge Washington, I would say that isn't something that the current track we're moving on is one that we should stop and wait for those other analyses coming in. A lot of cases, the zoning's already in place to allow those uses, like Halo Vista, for example, in coming in. So the zoning's already there. So us stopping that isn't going to change the trajectory of that, other than we won't have the ability to market those lands for economic development opportunities and benefit from the TSMC investment that is happening today because of the lack of wastewater, because we'd be holding it up for fiscal impact analysis. So that's why I was suggesting that.
Can I interject real quick? Because I think what I'm saying is not necessarily for a specific project. I think because of what I'm hearing is that there's a multitude of factors that are in play on how we move forward. And we use let's use Halo Vista as an example. We have, that project has been approved, and we are acknowledging that it would be difficult for us as a city to move forward with service in that project currently. Is that correct?
Vice Mayor, Councilman Hodge Washington, yes, there's a wastewater capacity issue up north for that particular project as it builds out.
So instead of my concern is, or my thought process is, instead of maybe dealing with this on a one-off analysis every time there is a project of this magnitude or a situation of this magnitude, would it be helpful for us to spend some time and have an analysis done and kind of help us direct of possible ways that we can move forward with this without having to simply be dealing with, and not saying that we want to take away the ability to review issues as they arrive, but maybe if we have a better, for me, maybe if I had a little bit more comfort level in associating, like saying, this is our plan, we know we can establish this, and this, instead of having the developer tell us based on where they've decided to do construction, where our priorities. I would like to see if this may help us as a city determine where our priorities should be when it comes in terms of economic development.
Vice Mayor, Councilman Hodge Washington, that's an excellent point, and would be what we would want to ultimately see coming out of the fiscal, impact analysis. And maybe I can suggest that if the subcommittee wants, staff could work on come up with a scope of work of how that would look, and then we could also, with the scope, be able to come back, talk to you guys, get some input on it, figure out what would be a timeline associated with that, and a potential cost, range associated with that, so that you can have that information to discuss. But then that way, we are still moving forward to take some of the other steps that we will need to look at doing, like impact fees, while we bring that forward, have a discussion with the subcommittee and council, and get input, and then we can move forward however directed in that.
I think that would be helpful because I do think that we will see more and more of these instances, especially when you look at sometimes not all of the projects are necessarily guided by us, but we have other players. And it would be helpful for us to have a framework that shows us, that gives us a little more insight. So I definitely would appreciate more of that, of an approach. I do believe it's important. I don't want to quash development, but I also want to make sure that we are not, that we are more, I want to say we are more of the ones kind of guide in the direction versus being guided by others on how we do this. And I would like to make sure that it's a comprehensive and more cohesive approach to it. So that would be my preference. So thank you for the presentation. I know this is not a simple topic. I know there is a lot of factors that go into the conversation, and I appreciate the presentation that was done. So thank you, Adam. Thank you, Alan, and thank you, Max, for the presentation.
Thank you. I too think the fiscal impact analysis would be helpful, and maybe we can roll it into some of the discussion we're having with the budget. I also think it might actually help state lands as well, and maybe they can thoughtfully auction off property in a way that doesn't put a burden on the city financially. I don't know what level of work it will take you to put a scope together, but I think this would be a very valuable tool. Yes, Councilwoman.
You want to? Okay. I think this is actually a great discussion because I think we've learned from the past on parceling pieces and the demands. In particular, in Levine, we should have learned some of that and understand that we need to guide and really do a fiscal impact of what we're capable, have the ability to do if we're going to grow and where we're going to grow. And we know growth right now is in the north. What does that look like? And as the conversation came about the state land, we need them in the conversation. They are limited to what they can do, but we still need them at the conversation to say, what can you do, or where do you advise? And so I'm struggling with these suggestions or these next steps because I want a lot of clarity on what your next steps are in the sense of leverage available capacity. What does that really mean, and what does that look like? And the framework. I need a framework to say, to bite into it, I guess, or get teeth onto it to understand really, this is a great big concept, but now I'm getting into the weeds. Because for me, it's all about the details and the weeds that we pass something and then it's not what we thought, it's what a vision of someone else of what we need to do. We just need to bless it. And so I want to understand all these pieces. So thank you, Councilwoman Hodge-Washington, for bringing the subject, bringing it forward. One of the things that the fiscal impact analysis was stated is we may do one-offs and then we'll look at this. How do we do that? How do we go about doing that? You know, how do we determine this one-off is valuable and this other one isn't? And so I think there needs to be a framework or some type of how we're going to look, a global way of looking at it with all the different partners at the table to say, this is the city's vision. So I don't know. You tell me.
Vice Mayor, council member, members of the subcommittee, staff has been reaching out to other cities across the country, trying to gather information about these types of studies. And what we have found and what we've heard from other practitioners is that These are not being done on a regular basis nationally, and so there's a little bit of trailblazing, if you will. I think it was maybe more common a few decades ago, before the economic development arms race began. But I do think that there's a little bit of trailblazing to be done in this regard, specifically on the identifying available capacity. What I would say is that this is a study that we'd be asking our water department and our streets department primarily to look at and reflect on the fact that infrastructure is designed to meet the needs of the development at the time that it comes in. But what happens over time is the use and demand on those facilities changes, whether it's manufacturing leaving the city, leaving our customer base, whether it's the integration of new technology and the water conservation savings that occurs from that. Those dynamics change how our infrastructure is used. And so what we're really looking at is a survey of how the land use and how the demands on our systems has changed, and identifying where it's changed in a way that demands have come down. I think all of us can probably, survey our daily commute and find out where, traffic hasn't come down, but it's a little less evident underground in the water and sewer lines.
Thank you. I'm just going to, it's been mentioned, but in these next steps, 1, 2, and 3, where do the impact fees fall in? Where does that conversation start?
So Councilman Pastor and Vice Mayor, the impact fees are part of one of the principal funding strategies that we have to fund infrastructure in the high growth parts of the city. And so that is something that we would be looking at once we got down the road with some results of a fiscal impact analysis to be able to have some data maybe for the next impact fee update about what types of land uses are having certain impacts, to be able to have a discussion about it. One of the things that is very necessary and required under state law is your infrastructure financing plans have to have the data associated with what you're charging for the fees. And so none of the stuff that we're talking about here would impact the existing impact fee update that is going through the council process right now, because if you delay that, you are going to stop us from charging impact fees that are necessary to fund that infrastructure, and that will ultimately end up stopping development within those areas. And so staff would recommend that we continue on with those discussions, however they may take place through the council adoption process, but we can also pursue these tracks, and through 1 and 2, that won't make much of a difference on impact fees, because we are working with them to, for example, in number 2, to address the infrastructure that goes into that 10-year forecast. So the plans are adopted with, here's the next growth that we anticipate happening within 10 years. The State Land Department is a member of the ad hoc committee that looks at all of the impact fees and reviews all the information, meets with the consultants and all the work that Adam's team does. And so those plans would be looked at could be updated with new information that would come out of a fiscal impact analysis at our next 5-year update, because we're required to update those pursuant to the statute every 5 years.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is we will be having an impact fee discussion simultaneously or running on the same tracks as you're developing, or if we approve this, developing 1, 2, and 3. Is that what I'm hearing?
Vice Mayor, Councilman Pastor, that's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
So this wasn't agendized to take action, but if you pursue some of this and flesh it out and come back at a later time, would that work? Because we really don't show it as an action item. Yeah.
Certainly, Vice Mayor, it does say possible action on the agenda. So it was on there if the subcommittee wanted to provide direction.
Not mine, unless you updated the agenda.
Well, we have the agenda, the published actual agenda itself says,
The posted agenda does say possible action.
Okay.
I apologize about the confusion.
Yeah, we must have an outdated one. Thank you. Okay, yeah. Yes, Councilwoman.
Unless someone else had a further question who hasn't had an opportunity to ask a question, I did have a follow-up question. Is that okay? Okay. Yep. Thank you. I know part of the answer to Councilwoman Pastor, you indicated that other cities had done a similar fiscal impact analysis. Can you tell us a little bit? Can you tell me a little bit more about that, or are there any ideas of, like, I'll let you start with that. Which cities, if any, have done, and if there's any guidelines on how they've applied those?
So specifically, we've spoken with representatives from the city of Boston and representatives from New York City. They have different scopes of what those studies involve. Generally, they're all looking at revenue generation and cost of service. What's that ratio? My recollection from the conversation with Boston is that they have a threshold that is set by the scale of development, and I don't have enough detail to explain that, but there's some, my recollection is there's some threshold at which they would require this type of study to be conducted. New York City's threshold is based on a value of public contribution.
Okay, thank you so much for that help, because to me that was one of the things that was kind of in the back of my head. At what point is this a significant enough? We can't do it for every potential project that comes before us as a city, but I think it may be helpful for our larger scale opportunities that we do come into it with more information, a kind of a preview of what we can expect to anticipate as going forward. And I just also wanted to clarify in regards to I'm open to all of the recommendations from my perspective. I think we should be approaching this issue with all three of the factors at hand. Mm-hmm. We should definitely we should be trying to target income in projects to those areas that already have capacity. I think that's a more prudent use of our resources while we try to continue to expand it. I also think the parcel sequencing, I like the strategy. I definitely think we should do what we can to partner with the state land department. And I think we have shown time after time that the city has been a good partner with the state, and I think this is no different. I think if we explain to them the benefits from their perspective as well, and how we can work together more cohesively, this is another extension of that. And I think I've spent enough time on the fiscal impact analysis for you to understand kind of where my mindset is going with that. I think it just helps us plan better as a city to ensure that we are prepared for those projects and we are not following. So I would definitely like to see us come up with some level of guidelines that say this would be something that is a requirement or strongly recommended if a project has this amount of impact on us as a city, so that we make those decisions with our eyes, with more information. So thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to explain myself.
Thank you. So Alan, do you have suggestions for a possible motion?
Vice Mayor, members of the subcommittee, I think that staff could come back with like a framework for items 1 and 2 at the February TIP agenda, and then we'll try for February on the fiscal impact analysis, but that might be March TIP agenda to come back with the scope of work for that one and anticipated costs. We'll try for February on that part of it, but we do have to do, as Adam said, we've done some research, talked to a few cities. That
Right.
needs to be more, and it's hard to get a hold of folks during the holidays, and so that will, happen afterwards, more than likely. And so putting that information together so that we can then figure out, here's how they're working in other cities, what's best for us, as the city to be looking at, and come up with some recommendations to then figure out a scope of work of how we get there and potential costs, to then come talk to you guys.
Okay.
That's going to be, probably more the March timeframe, but we will try for February.
Okay, that sounds great. Can I have a motion?
So move.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All right, thank you so much. This is a very important topic. Obviously, as we grow, we got to make sure we can pay for it. So if I now can turn to the attorney to explain the role of public comment.
All right, thank you. During citizen comment, members of the public may address the subcommittee for up to 3 minutes on issues of interest or concern to them. The Arizona Open Meeting Law permits the subcommittee members to listen to the comments, but prohibits members from discussing or acting on the matters presented.
Thank you. Our first speaker, Jerry Van Guest.
Thank you, subcommittee members. 2 months in a row now, I'm amazed, but not so much, that there's nothing on the agenda for the Parks Department. Nothing. And we're out there every day, a group of public watchdogs, and believe me, there's all kinds of criteria out there that needs to be discussed and worked on. Nothing's happening. But again, I can guarantee you, next month when the Parks Board meets, they'll be there pushing their agenda, which brings me to our basic point is, we want those meetings. In fact, we don't want them. We demand that those meetings be videotaped. The same as these, the formal council meeting this afternoon. Everything's set up here. You can videotape them. We'll have a record. We hear all the talk about transparency and accountability. Without a videotape, there is none. They edit the minutes from every meeting are edited. Our attorneys have filed numerous, since the pandemic started, record requests with nothing, over the last 8 months, no response at all. And then the other thing is, up until the pandemic, because we won a lawsuit 10 years ago on an illegal taking of money from 3PI fund, Patricia Boland, the city attorney, was at every one of those meetings, Parks Board. That stopped. We want a city attorney there, and we want them videotaped. Thank you.
Next, Jessica Dobbs.
Good morning, subcommittee members. I am here today to request that all Phoenix Parks and Recreation Board meetings starting next month be televised and made available online for greater public participation and oversight. The Phoenix Park and Recreation Board is an unelected board that oversees a very large budget and creates sweeping policies that affect millions of people. The city of Phoenix itself started televising their city council meetings in 1983. And 41 years later, apparently we cannot expect the same from the Parks Board. The city council meetings are televised. The TIP committee meeting is televised. Public Safety and Justice Committee televised, and numerous others going down the list. The absence of video recordings from the Parks and Board meetings and the limited availability of meeting minutes, including being late, being in confusing locations like the next month's agenda, and being quite sparse and edited. This does not allow the public to fully engage with and understand the discussions and decisions made by the Parks and Recreation Board. Most recently, this occurred at the October 24th meeting when an item labeled as an update led to a motion that greatly expanded the trail heat closure policy, much to the shock of thousands of stakeholders that were given no voice in that process, nor could they even access the video online to witness that decision-making process for themselves. This highlights the pressing need to have all Parks and Rec Board meetings televised and archived online, like the City Council and this one that we're at now. And as we can see, that means the infrastructure is already in place. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Tim Sierakowski.
Good morning, Merry Christmas. My name is Tim Sierakowski. Just to reiterate what has already been stated, it's time to start letting the public know exactly what is going on at the park board's meeting. It's time. I'm looking at minutes of things that I've spoken about, not even correct, absolutely taken out of context, and it's really against your open meeting law violations. We have filed an open meeting violation with the Attorney General for the October meeting. I'm just giving you a heads up, it's coming. And we're at a point now the public needs and deserves a better representation, especially with the amount of individuals that the Parks Board are influencing. Every other committee has it being videotaped and allows the public to see this, and the Parks Board even more so, especially with all the different recreational areas that are being serviced by the Parks Board, needs to be open to the public, and they need to be able to see this at any time, and they need to be able to go back and reflect upon what was taking place at the Parks Board meetings. At this point, I really believe that the Parks Board and the Parks Department, especially looking at the statute that was instituted in October, really has too much power, and I think the statute is over vague. I think they're not elected officials, and they're influencing and having the effect on millions of people, and I think that's against the Arizona Constitution. I think we need to take a strong look at exactly what this statute says and how the statute is giving power to a non-elected group of individuals affecting millions of people in the park system. So I think these two things should be addressed. I think we should start looking at these two things, and I think they're not elected officials, and the Parks Board is not elected officials. They're given this power through the mayor. They're not elected. They can't make decisions for millions of people. So I think we should start addressing this, and I think the people have a right to be represented by people who are elected instead of people who are put in place by the mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is future tip agenda items. I do believe we have a presentation that Parks will be giving, and then I think we'll also have further discussion on infrastructure funding and financing. Is there any other request?
Yeah, I'm going to make the request regarding a possible survey from 19th Avenue to 16th Street of the growth between Camelback and down to McDowell to see the traffic patterns that are with the growth that's going to happen on Central and all the different pieces where traffic patterns and are possibly could go through.
Yes, Madam Chair and Councilwoman Pastor, that is something you requested previously. We do have it on the list, and my apologies that we're not showing it on your future items list, but we'll make sure it's there for the future.
Thank you.
And then I feel like we should probably have a discussion of what the responsibility of the Parks Board is and then our responsibility. And I'm only saying this because when I first got elected, I was the chair of whatever that committee was, but it was education, arts,
Right.
and parks. And I feel like there's a disconnect here with the committee on our responsibility with the parks.
Right, and I think that's part of the presentation that we were asking Parks to do when they
Okay.
come back. So
Thank you.
But thank you for suggesting that as well. Any other items? We're adjourned.
Serious issue. Heat-related issues equal health-related issues. And we need for the federal government to step